Hello, I am Reverend Dr. Weta Lee, and I'm back again with you today to talk about wow, what a ride. Retirement gives you lots of time to think and to contemplate many different issues. And if you are really not just about yourself, but concerned about the world in which you live, it is the time to reflect upon all of the various things that are going on in our country today. And in addition to writing, it also calls you to read sometime. So I'm reading This is the Fire by Don Lemon. He's one of my favorite news reporters on CNN, and I love to watch him. I love the pureness of his voice as he speaks and as he challenges those he interviews. He's not afraid, he's very courageous, but I love in the entrance of his book how he commends his sisters, his grandmother who raised him, and how he's speaking a word to his nephew who is a newborn, and he's writing this letter to him about what it means to stand strong and to understand that those women who have raised him have lived and had to be tough in the midst of all that we have faced. As I read that, I am thinking of wow, what a ride, and I began to reflect on what it means to be politically active in our world today. My mother and father had to pay poll taxes in order to vote. I remember going in the little room across from the grocery store the family my mother worked for owned. I recall them going in there and placing their vote after they had paid their poll tax. And Don reminds us of all of the various tests that Louisiana had to keep people of color from being able to vote, and especially his grandmother who had a limited education. As I think of that and contemplate these two books together, I'm reminded of when I turned 18 years old. That was about the year 1967. I just graduated high school, and I lived in Houston during the summer of that first year, and then I came back to my hometown in Henderson. While in Houston, I could just go any place and eat and do whatever I wanted to, and then I came back to my small town of Henderson, Texas. When I arrived there was a restaurant that we always used to go to, but when we would go, my family was forced to sit in the back, take their food out of the back window, eat under a wire covered, and the pigeons would come and drop droppings all over the place while we sat to eat. Well, we had advanced from there, and I've been in Houston all summer, and I was so accustomed to going to any restaurant I wanted to go to. But when I walked in the door of Mac's restaurant in Henderson, Texas, there was no one there. There was no one there, and I went to take a seat, and Mac himself came out. I suppose it was Mac, but it was the owner of the restaurant or the manager, and he said to me, "I have a seat for you back here." And I said, "Well, I just want to sit right here." He said, "I have a seat for you back here." And he took me into the kitchen, and he said, "You can have a seat right here." My friend with whom I'd gone to town with, I lived out in the rural, I had gone to town with her. She said, "I just came from Mac's and had a hamburger." And I suppose they were really washing her plate. When I walked in, the young man, I was seated next to the dishwashing tub, and the young man was washing dishes. And I said, "I want to sit up here." He says, "No, I have a seat back here for you." And he took me to the kitchen to buy my food with the same green dollar that everybody else had. I was told, "This is where you're going to sit." I said, "Thank you, sir. I'm not eating here. I would not pay my money the same as everyone else and be treated differently." As I said, the year was 1967. Those were stormy times in our nation. But as I was reading This is the Fire, it raised up that thought in me that I no longer have to go to the back door. I no longer have to go around to the back. I am God's child, and I have the right to go wherever I choose. And in this time when our young African American men are being murdered for just trying to do and stand up for their families, we are living in the midst of unjust times. I don't want any of you to despair. As Don mentioned in This Is the Fire, he's talking about racism and how racism is crippling our nation. I so often wonder, like the young man who was able to teach the doctor how to put the BT shot into the child in the surgery because he was the one who had discovered it in the first place. I often wonder if we are missing the cure to cancer, or perhaps we are missing the opportunity of the creativity that can be brought by people of color, because racism has raised its ugly head. Or perhaps the greatest leadership, the one that would challenge and encourage others to stand up and be leaders, we silence their voices because they don't speak softly and they don't stay in their place. Oh, I've tried very hard to never stay in my place, but to always be all that God would have me to be. I'm retired now, but even as I read this book and as I contemplate this book, I know that God does not mean for me to just speak a word, but to live the word. I live in Dallas, Texas. It was about a year ago that a young woman was sentenced to prison, a police officer, and she came back before the courts yesterday in hopes of being released. She was not an ethnic person, and she believed that her privilege was going to allow her to walk free. I believe, as the Bible says, even though we don't often see it, as in the case of George Floyd, one day, truly, justice will roll down like water, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. But until that time, those of us who know who we are must stand strong for those things that we believe. No more water, but fire next time. Don Lemon says, this is the fire. But in the midst of my life and all of the challenges that I have faced, going to a segregated school, having books that never had a back on them, having books that there was no space to write our names, but yet we are able to achieve. It wasn't easy, believe me, it was not easy accomplishing a doctorate degree from the Perkins School of Theology. But when one believes in oneself, nothing is impossible. My friends, I pray, whatever it is that you are seeking today, that you never give up. I thank God for my friend, Reverend Adrian Zachary in Los Angeles, California, because she preached a sermon from Ezekiel 37:9 at the Holly Park United Methodist Church. And she talked about breathing. Oh my God. That is what the Lord said to Ezekiel to prophesy to the people. He said, let the winds come from the north, the south, the east, and west, and blow within, and let us breathe that breath. And I am so very thankful that even though I'm retired, I can breathe. Breathe the breath of life and the breath of God that flows through me. And that means more than just taking care of myself, but it means being concerned about the brokenness of this world and to speak to people who are broken that you can rise again. It doesn't matter the opposition. I know COVID has been hard. It has hit all of us hard, but we don't have to stay down because we got knocked down. We have to get up. And we have to move forward, and we have to breathe with the breath of God breathing through us. Why do I say that? Even though this is the fire, wow, what a ride. We can make it. And we must believe that nothing is impossible with God. I encourage you to stand strong and be all that God has made you, and be the very best that you can be. And when you allow God to live through you, nothing is impossible. God bless.